Okay. This RE is just meant to be a quick recap of the very first part of the chapter. Not meant to be difficult, just for you to do a quick revision. You have no time to revise, the RE is revision. Yeah, always remember that. Do your RE well in this context revision. Try to understand what you're doing. But try and get your pen and work with it. Yeah, like red movement. Explain with reference to a type of nuclear division why a patch of aspen trees is known as a clone. Okay, the idea of a clone means it's genetically identical. Genetically identical means they have the same alleles, same types of genes. So, with reference to a type of nuclear division, your answer should contain the word mitosis somewhere. Then mention of genetically identical to each other. To explain what a clone is. What is an aspen tree? Later we Google. Always good to know what the thing looks like. So we'll find out what an aspen tree looks like. Okay. Again, for biology, I would say a good way to do corrections fast is to just put down the keywords for yourself. And use English to string everything else together. If you have time to copy it, ingest it, and then after everything is on the Google Classroom. Okay, the digital version. Okay, so what's an aspen tree? I don't know what it looks like. Aspen tree. Ooh. Okay, so this is an aspen tree. Can reproduce via vegetative propagation. Hey, was it your class that planted my potatoes? Oh no. Oh, okay. They planted a few. So we'll wait, then we'll see whether vegetative propagation takes place. It suggests why it may be advantageous for the trees to reproduce via vegetative propagation rather than sexually. This question is asking you what's the good points of asexual reproduction. Okay. What are some good things about asexual reproduction? They're not all bad. What do you write? Okay, only one parent needed. Well, that is a pretty good point. Any other thing that's good about asexual reproduction? Fujita. Yeah, so you let's share answer, can I? Yeah, share what you've got. You're asking why may be advantageous for it to go through vegetative propagation. Okay, ensure the survival of particular species in a habitat. Add on to that, what could be add on you can talk about that good genes are passed on. Right? If you have good genes, then you just pass it on to the next generation. And everybody has good genes. Okay, I think that may be the points that were brought up. Isiang brought up one parent required. That's great, because if you have one parent, less time and energy is needed. That's really a plus point. Yes?
We know that there's only one parent, but they say that it doesn't have to rely on pollination.
Oh, it doesn't have to rely on pollination.
So it's a
But you say it's faster?
yeah, I said it's, they use more efficiently.
Oh, okay. I think the word efficient and effective can be elaborated on. A bit efficient what sense? Effort, time, resources. Okay. Production of genetically identical offspring. This may be a good thing if we write on what Vijita said, that the offspring will be equally able to survive in the habitat that it was in. Okay. Then after that we come to the last question. Okay, if you know you are the kind that go home, won't look at Google Classroom, won't do the corrections even though it's provided to you, then just do it faster. Yeah? The last point, rapid multiplication. The idea of speed. You could go faster if you just do it yourself, I guess. last question. Suggest the circumstances under which a sperm will choose to reproduce sexually rather than via asexual reproduction. Okay. When would sexual reproduction be useful? Okay, when would it be useful compared to asexual? Yeah, we can hear from you. Okay, perhaps when you want genetic variation, you want a little bit of a shuffle so that everyone gets a different deck of cards. If everyone has a different deck of cards, there's a chance that a few of you can win the poker game. Yeah? But if we have all the same deck of cards and you have a bad hand, everyone's going to lose the game. Right? So that's really what sexual reproduction is for. We want to give everyone a different hand so that we have different chances of survival. Okay? So, first point that what Gia said, genetic variation. This is especially useful if the environment is constantly changing. If the game keeps changing. Right? If every day the game is different. One day a hot sun, another day a disease sweeps by. A population with different cards, different genes, alleles, gives them a better chance of surviving all the different things that come by. In a part, I like what he's trying to say. Right? This way, at least one person will survive. If everyone gets a different hand of cards, there's a chance one person will win the poker game. Or maybe two. Then the two of you can go and shuffle together and make more kids. Yeah? Hey, but you know what's good about that? If both of you have good cards and you shuffle among yourselves, then all your kids will have good cards. Right? So that's the idea of what's happening at sexual reproduction. I need to stop using you and me. Maybe we use plants and animals. Okay, for those that are done, this is the last question. For those that are done, I'd like you to take out a textbook. We're going to go on to the chapter of plant reproduction. Once again, if you want to know the schedule for the day, you can go to the schedule to find out more. So today's schedule, we're supposed to go through structure of flower and a bit of pollination. So page what? I can't remember what I said. Alright, this should be possible. Okay, the scope of today is page. I'll still remember. Page schedule for today. We're going to do. Alright, what's we at? Okay, today we're going to do parts of the flower and we're going to do pollination. Page 18 to 20. 23 to 26 is our scope for today. Some of them covered in the SLS. You all must do SLS. I don't chase you all, but I chase the JH2s. Now JH1s and 2s, I chase them. I will like copy and paste all their names and I'll put them in the list to check through. And they must cancel off their names one. But I don't do that to you all. So please do your SLS. You have self-manage at this age. Okay, we are done with RE 5.1. We're going to go to the parts of a flower. Okay, there's the same feature on Google Excel sheet. It's very cool. You can check boxes. Uncheck, check, uncheck, check. Oh, sure. Okay, alright, so we're going to go parts of a flower. I believe you've done this a little bit in primary school. For those that were in primary school in Singapore. Everyone, primary school in Singapore? Everyone missed that? Okay, so everyone was in Singapore primary school. Okay. So you all know parts of the flower? Are you not? But you learned parts of the flower before? Okay, so we'll begin today with sexual reproduction, but more specifically with plants. We start with the unfamiliar, meaning the plant kingdom. Then we go to the more familiar territory. But before we begin, I'd just like to extract from your minds what you recall from the topic from flowers. What are the structure of flowers? Reason why we're studying flowers is because those are sexual organs of plants. Right? So flowers. Every time you give someone else a flower, you're just giving them sexual organs of a plant. Yeah? Okay, so parts of a flower. Alright, yeah, just ruin your whole view. Have you started filming? Oh. Okay. Okay, so just shoot. Whatever parts of a flower you already know from your days in primary school. Alright, ready? As many as you know. Okay, let's go.
Stigma.
Oh yeah, yes, stigma.
Style.
Stigma, style. That is what style.
Ovule.
Enter. Ovule. Ovary. Stalk stem sheet.
I think we need to refilm this video.
Above the ovule, okay, what's above the ovule?
Filament.
Filament. Petals, okay. Anything else? Sorry, Mary? What? Sepals? Is it? Okay, sepals. Anything else?
Pollen sac.
Pollen sac. Okay, let's add more. Pollen sac. Anything else? No more? Okay, is there it? Okay, how do these words relate to each other? I'd like you to spend some time talking to your friends now. How do they relate to each other? Now, while I will going to string them together. How do they relate to each other? Okay, around a little bit more, wrap up your conversations, and I'll choose one of you from your groups. Okay, let's settle down. Then I'll ask a few of you. Nikita, up to you. Choose any words you want to take together. Okay, I'm not sorry, listen. Sorry? Okay, the ovules, the ovary, the stigma, and the style. They are related? Okay, they are all the female reproductive parts. And what do we call the female reproductive part? Carpel. Okay. Thank you. So what would that look like? The ovary. Inside the ovary there's a cavity, and you will find ovules. Ovules are the eggs of the plant. There need not be just one ovule. There can be multiple ovules. Okay, there can be multiple ovules. Many eggs inside the belly of the plant, right? The ovary. And then we go up that stick-like thing, the thing. Okay, it's called a style. And then on the very top, the stigma, where the pollen grain sinks to. Let's close this. Alright, next. Wait. Shami? You like draw relations or anything else? Filament, enter. Okay, filament. anther as well as pollen sac. The male part, right? And what do we call the male part of the plant? Stamen. Okay? Okay, stamen, okay, the male part. Yeah? So where's the stamen? You often find the filament followed by the anther. Inside the anther are sacs of pollen. Okay? So if I were to slice this pollen, this anther, you will find sacs of pollen inside. Sacs. Okay? Remaining, we have petals and sepals. Petals are the next layer. And then we have sepals, the final layer on the outside. Flowers tend to have 4 rings. 4 rings of parts. The outermost ring, we start off with the sepals. Many sepals, collectively, we call it the calyx. The calyx is many sepals. And then the next layer going in, we refer to them as petals. These are often the very colorful regions. And we call them, a collection of them together, I don't know how to spell this, corolla. How to spell it? C-R-O. Oops. Oh, that's totally off my spelling. C-O-R-O-L-L-A. Oh, okay. Okay, the corolla. A group of petals, we call them corolla. The next layer in are all the male parts, the stamen. At the core of the flower is the female part, the carpel. Right? So flowers tend to have 4 rings of wings. Outer to inner, at the core is the female part. At the outermost is sepals. Many of them called the wings. Right? Flowers. A work of wonder by nature. There are many kinds of flowers, as we will see today in our lesson. Do you know cactus also got flower? Can you see all the anthers? Can you see at the core, stigma? This is another cactus, flower. This is a timelapse. Okay. Today I brought my favorite flower. Okay, my favorite flower plays a role in this square. I love this square. Square salad. I don't exactly know the ingredients, but at the very top, I know it's pandan flavor. Right? What exactly is it made of? Anyone here knows? Yeah, it's pandan and goes in it. Is it cream? It's really nice, it's creamy on top. The base is glutinous rice, and then you see the blue pigments there. That's what my favorite flower contributes to. My favorite flower is the butterfly pea flower. You've seen this flower before? Sometimes you see along the streets, like vines. They are quite wonderful. They can create a wonderful blue pigment. I'd like to show you the kind of pigment that can be created. Here I have some butterfly pea flowers. Okay, a dry ones up. It gives quite a beautiful tinge of blue. Right? Don't know if the color. Okay, so it gives quite a beautiful tinge of blue. Very rare can you find the color blue in nature. A lot of times when you see blue, it's often just the structural features on top of the plant or the animal that reflects light in a certain way, makes it look blue. But it truly isn't blue. This flower, however, can actually produce a blue pigment. So I think it's really beautiful. One special feature of this, one special feature of this particular blue flower, the pigment, is that, well, some of you know its special property. is that it is, maybe it's best to show you up front. Okay, so you watch the blue color. You see it changing color? Yeah, it's quite a special property of this blue butterfly pea flower. Its pigment is an indicator. No acids and bases is an indicator. So when you add an acid, it turns this color. If I were to add a base, it will turn yellow. Yeah? But we very rarely eat bases. So you won't find that in sorry? Light boy. Oh yeah, you don't eat light boy, right? You don't eat bleach also. So very often what you would find is this happening. I see the color beautiful, right? So if you ever see this kind of gimmick, right, in drink stalls, where they serve you a blue drink, then they serve you a slice of lemon and give it a squeeze, right? Then it turns purple. This is the science behind it. It actually comes from the butterfly pea flower. It is an indicator. Today, especially for you, yesterday I was like, I look like some sort of like secretive dealer, right? I went to the MRT station, right? Then I look left, look right. Then a person comes up, they take out a little bit of cash, and I pass it, then they pass me a bag, and then I run off. Right? But what I did yesterday was that I went to buy from a supplier blue pea flowers. We won't have practical specifically for this, so I thought it would be nice if we can all do a little dissection in class. Alright, so I'd like everyone to take a butterfly pea flower. We're going to do a mini dissection in class, and we're going to learn all these parts and see how it applies in real life. Okay? Okay, so as I pass this box around, pick a flower of your choice. At the end of the dissection, you will keep the petals, and then after that, you can go and make that indicator yourself if you want to. Anyone got penknife, scissors? Okay. The dissection does not require these two things. Right? I've created a dissection process that only requires your fingernails. You got fingernails? No have. You like yeah, so you only need those parts, your fingernails. But at the very last stage, if you want to do this extra step, it's quite amazing that step, then you have to use penknife. Here ready? Everyone get a flower. I apologize in advance, not all the flowers are in like very, very fresh looking. Okay, they don't last very long once plucked. Okay, but there are like 40 plus in there, so hopefully you can find one that you are happy with. If not, what? Go around Singapore, pluck with it. Yeah. A lot of my colleagues thought that I went around Singapore to pluck all the flowers. Yeah. I have this reputation for collecting a lot of random stuff. Okay, I am about to show you a video guide of me teaching you how to dissect this flower. I would like you to try to find all these parts in a while. Okay? Up to you if you want to follow along the video, or if you want to wait till the entire video is done, then you dive into it. Okay? Then you know the full picture. My recommendation is to go through the video first, be very clear of the steps, and then you do it. Alright? Ready? See where you got flower? Okay. Who doesn't have? Yeah, you tell all the flowers are yours now. Ready? Ready up? Okay. I'm going to write on the whiteboard all the parts I'd like you to search for later on. Alright, I'd like you to pay close attention to the video. I'm only going to show the steps once. You ruin your flower, that's it. Okay? But actually that's what we're about to do. We're about to tear it apart. Right? Love me, love me, love me, love. Okay, ready? Okay, so you choose a statement in your mind, and later you slowly drop the petals up. Okay. Ready? And let's begin. Okay, typical iMovie tune. blue color. I cannot describe the feeling I have when I see this blue. It reminds me of, okay, you need to start. The epicalyx. If you look at flowers, some of them have this part. It's called the epicalyx. The epicalyx is rather special. It is not the sepals. It is an even outermost layer, right? Some flowers have it, some don't have it. This particular flower has it. You will also find a receptacle. The receptacle is that broad base at the bottom of the flower, that fat region. Its role is to hold up the flower, top it up. But later on, I would like you to pinch off that part. You can either pinch it off or use a penknife to just cut off the receptacle along with the epicalyx. Then you end up with this very cute. You all know Harry Potter? It's like a snitch now. Yeah? So you get this like ball with two wings. Alright? From then on, then the fun begins. You will start removing part by part. Starting with the outermost ring of sepals. I'd like you to count how many sepals there are later on. They make up the calyx. But I would like you to peel it off. Right? Kind of like a sushi roll. Take out the seaweed and then they are left with the rice and noodle. Right? So this is the calyx. It will look like a crown. Okay, if you do it right. It will look like a paper crown. Yeah, so this is going quite fast. I suggest you watch, then you do later on. Okay? What's interesting about this flower is that the sepals are fused together, unlike a lot of flowers. Okay, they are connected to each other. Okay, so that's the outermost layer, the sepals. Then let's move in to the petals. Okay, so fourth layer on the outside, third layer on the inside. Okay, let's go to petals. If you look at the petals, you will find nectar guides. You see these lines leading to the core of the flower. This is like a runway of the roots guiding the pollinators in. The biggest petal is called the banner petal. Then there are two more blue petals on the inside. We refer to them as wing petals. You should be able to just take out the wing petals one by one, right? If you plucked off the receptacle. Later on, try best display like I do, very nicely, just in one concentric, like radial pattern. Once you peel off the wing petals, you will find another two petals beneath. These two petals beneath are white in color. They are called hue petals. For your information, I do not need you to memorize these parts, just to show you the diversity in the real plant kingdom. Okay, for you, just know that flowers got petals lah. Right? So I'm just showing you my favorite flower has three kinds of petals. Okay. Once you peel apart the hue petals, then again place them to the sides. What will the next layer be? Right, we go ring by ring. The star? The star is called the female part. Remember, female is always at the top of the flower. Okay, so we should go to the male parts next. The second last layer are the male parts, the stamens. The stamens are made up of filaments and anthers. You will find that my flower is rather special. It has 9 anthers and filaments fused together. And then there's just one free stamen by its side. Alright? In total there are 10 stamens, but 9 are fused. This is a very special feature of this flower. Go and try to find that. Alright? 10 in total, 9 fused. And then we go to the core of the flower. Number 1. The center. This part is the trickiest part. Really, you are unraveling a sushi roll. You have to slowly unravel the filaments. Okay, watch out. Then you find at the center. See, I'm rolling it apart. Okay, and at the center you'll find the ovary, the style. Right, so it's like a sushi roll, right? There you should find the carpel. carpel consists of the stigma. The stigma close is feathery. You can zoom in and have a look later on. Then there's the style. And the style connects to the ovary. Now the last part is most exciting. If you have a penknife, if you are adept enough, you can slice it open and you will find the ovules. Can you see the ovules? Don't they look like mini peas? Right? So these are the ovules. You can try that for yourself. That's the hardest part. They are extremely tiny, yeah? Okay, and that will be our mini practical in class. But one fun fact for you. Don't you think the ovary and ovule look like pea pod? That's because it eventually develops into a pea pod. So this is what it looks like after pollination. That small segment will enlarge into a pea pod. So guess what? The ovules become the seeds. The ovary become the fruit. This is what I get. The very tip over here is the stigma of the pea pod. Alright? So I'd like you to try this out. I'll give you some time now to slowly go through the steps. If you need any help, please let me know. Feel free to film yourself. If you want an extra flower, let me know. Yeah? Then I'll pass you an extra flower. I think I've got enough for all of you to have a few rounds of it. Okay, then display your flowers neatly. If you have a notebook, even better. I guess you could plaster it in your notebook or keepsake. Wait. The flower, but it shouldn't attract it. Ah, very nice. He did up everything neatly. Not bad, you only use something else. You want to. You did? Do you see the ovules inside? Imagine a pea pod. If you want to see the seeds inside or the ovules, right? What you have to do is to slice it lengthwise. Right? Open up the pea pod. Oh, okay. Which part is this? So we start with outermost of the flower. Epicadics, and then plus the receptacle. Then you go down to the sepals. Sepals are this one.
I think I broke it.
No, look at now. Okay. Then after you go to the band.
I also think so.
Then after that, what's this? If you have trouble identifying any of the parts, please let me know. Try to tick off all the check boxes on the screen, on the whiteboard. May I see your open up, then some stick to that side. I see yours? Okay. Oh, you come to the free stamen. You managed to find the free stamen. Remember? There are actually 9 stamens that connect.
Boleh
One
kalau
stamen,
betul
right?
di hidup.
Oh yes, right. Okay, so there's one free stamen there. Yeah? Oh yeah, they're all edible. But I don't suggest you eat it now. Yeah? It's a bit dirty lah. Yeah? I also don't know what the person did when he plucked it for me. Oh, wow, you can see wow. Nice. Those are the modules. Which were eventually developed in the seeds. Are you trying to extract out? Oh, you
Oh my god, it's coloring my book blue, bro. The juice that's coming out is coloring my book. I can't find a free statement. Free and
Okay, for those that can identify the past, maybe help your friends out. Anyone wants a spare flower? You want spare flower? Here you go. After that, pass to Rihanna. And I take myself.
see anything to say from my book.
One spare, just take it from the box. Yeah.
I use the scissors and I put the shoe and all. Yeah, did you see
Okay.
No, you didn't
Take this time to appreciate how the models we give in class don't quite fit. Know what you see in real life.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of it, yeah? What we teach you is just a guide for you to identify. Oh, so nice, right? You can even see the nectar guys because you press it down. Akira did something quite interesting. He took the banner petal, pressed it onto his book. Then when he removed it, because of the nectar guides, he left the blue stripes on his book.
Oh, that's cool.
What's inside this thing?
You got all the parts?
I have some sweet lemon though.
Oh yeah, the one is a bit hard.
Hey, Junie, I have it.
You got a free filament? Oh, okay.
The ovule?
Yeah, it's inside this.
Sure. I'm not putting mine. I'm too. My.
You got the view?
It's really like super duper my
Where's your
Where?
Apple.
inside.
No idea.
I'm gonna do a uphill movie. Can't say, I don't think I'm supposed to do it that hard. Yeah, bro. That is so awesome.
You just color your blue for which book? Already before everybody.
consolidate. Look through the different parts of the flower. Right, you are expected to know the parts of the flower. If we were to give you a diagram, I'd like you to identify the parts of the flower.
Oh my god. You know what, I'm just going to keep it in here.
Yeah, I'm just leaving mine inside.
But no.
Like whoa! Oh my god. Washing it.
Ayo, just press down lah. Very funny.
How do you do that?
Do what? I just washed it full of. What are you doing?
Look at mine. It's like you know? It just looks like it's smudging, you know?
Yeah, mine does.
Yeah, right?
I want to take you.
Do this guy. Do the stamp.
Where are you taking it? On the Oh my god, I'm being blue.
Okay, please start to wrap up. Start to take your petals down, create patterns if you want to. If you want an extra flower, you can come collect it at the end of the lesson. Alright? To create indicator for yourself. Okay, I'd like to resume the lesson. So everyone, press your flowers. Okay, and take out textbooks. We're going to continue on using our flower as an example. Right, you will learn a little bit more about flowers today. So, as mentioned earlier, ovary of the flower will become the fruit. All the ovules that you manage to find, the tiny little things there, will become the seeds at the end of the day. So that means when you bite into an apple, you are biting into the ovary. You're like, and then you're biting into all the poor little seeds inside that were once the ovules. You're eating the eggs. Next time you get a fruit, I would like you to look at the fruit. One side of the fruit, you can actually find the remnants of the stigma. Because the stigma is connected to the ovary, right? And that's where pollination takes place. So if you look at one end of the fruit, you can find this leftover stigma. The other end, you will find the sepals, where it used to be connected to the flower. Sorry, the receptacle. You may find some leftover petals or sepals. Okay? Now we're going to go into classifying flowers and flowers. You learn in primary school that broadly there are two kinds of ways in which flowers can be pollinated. They are okay, wind, insect. Then you learn about self and cross. Yeah, largely pollination takes place via insect pollination, animal, or wind. Right, animal or wind. How do you tell if a flower is going to be pollinated by animals? Right. Okay, so I'm going to give you a series of flowers that you tell me. Where are my series of flowers? Okay, here. A, B, C, all the way to F. Which flowers do you think are pollinated by insects or animals? Okay, so this is A, B, C, D, E, F. Which one is pollinated by insects? Okay, who says A? pollinated by insects A, B, okay, some say B, C, D, E, F. What makes you say B, D, and E are pollinated by insects? One trait mentioned already, said that it's colorful. Okay, anything else about insect pollinated flowers? They may have rewards. And one of the rewards, nectar. Sometimes the insect searches for pollen grain rather than the sweet nectar. Because pollen grain contains a lot of protein. They are after all just cells. Yeah? So nectar, pollen, rewards. Anything else that gives you away that is an insect pollinated flower?
Nice smell.
Okay, there could be scent. There could be nice smell. Must the smell be very nice? And there are some flowers, right, that deliberately smell bad to attract things like houseflies. Like the refugia. It's scent. Anything else that gives you away that's insect pollinated plant? Flower. Nectar guides. Okay, I'll come back. I'll show you in a while. Nectar guides. These things guide the insects to their prize. And you see? Okay, enter and sigma, the reproductive tracts, tend to be hidden among petals. Gee, why do you think so? Yes. Okay, fair enough. Right, so that the wind doesn't carry it away. These pollen grains aren't light enough to be carried by wind. If it then goes out and just carried by wind, right, it just falls to the ground. Won't go anywhere. Yeah? So, good point. Another way is, and that's why they need all these rewards to force the insect to snuggle its way in to get the pollen grains out. What about wind pollinated plants? That means A, C, and A, B, C, D, E. A, C, and E are wind pollinated. Right? What makes them wind pollinated? Dangling what? What are exposed? Okay, the anthers may be very exposed and they could be dangling outside the flower. Why so? Easier for wind to blow, right? You also find the stigma dangling out, so it's easier to catch the pollen grains that are being carried by wind. Wind pollinated flowers also don't look quite beautiful, or in our definition of beautiful. And that means to say, when you go to gardens and see flowers, those flowers are most definitely insect pollinated, just because they are colorful. But you often miss the flowers that don't have the color. That's because they're not meant to attract, they're just meant to be carried by the wind. Wind doesn't care whether you are beautiful or not. Wind is wind, right? But what it cares about is that the pollen grains are as light as possible. Okay? You are expected to be able to classify flowers whether it's insect pollinated or wind pollinated. A table has been provided to you in a textbook. Please flip your textbook to find that table. This table is inside the textbook. Yeah? Maybe you want to star that. So one skill to pick up is that we will show you a flower. And then we ask you, tell me, do you think it's an insect or wind pollinated flower? And then you're expected to give the reasoning behind it. I like these questions. I think it's quite doable because it's quite relatable. You've seen it before. Okay, so this is one skill you should pick up for this particular lesson. Classifying insect and wind pollinated flowers. Next up, I'm going to give you some terminology that you're expected to know about flowers. First, complete versus incomplete. Okay? Find a page in your textbook that talks about all these little terms. It should be bolded for you. By the end of the lesson, you should also know the difference between all these terms. complete, incomplete. Here, you should find it on page 19 of the textbook. Page 19 of the textbook, you see all the golden words, complete, incomplete. Okay, what's a complete flower? Okay, in a while I'm going to test you to see if you can make sense of all these terms together. A complete flower has all parts, all four rings. Okay? Keep that in mind, huh? Complete flower has all four rings that a flower should have. From sepals to petals to the stamens to the carpels. That is what a complete flower is. Next terminology I'd like you to take note of. Perfect versus imperfect. A perfect flower has both female and reproductive parts. Okay? Yeah. Okay, what did I say? Oh, that makes no sense. Okay. A perfect flower has both male and female parts. Okay? An imperfect flower only has one, either or. Okay? Again, complete flower has all four rings, from sepals to carpels. Okay? Now, while we're going to do a little bit of brain teaser. Okay, so a question for you. To be perfect is to be complete. Is that true? A perfect flower has to be a complete flower. Is that true? I'd like you to discuss with your friends. A perfect flower has to be a complete flower. Okay, true or false? To be perfect is to be complete. Okay, ready? Alright. Who thinks this statement is true? To be a perfect flower, you have to be complete. True, raise your hand. False? Okay. False. So what would that means to say a perfect flower to be incomplete. Right? A perfect flower to be incomplete. Which layers can you remove? You could remove the sepals, you could remove the petals, and it is still a perfect flower. Right? What would such a flower look like? I'd like to show you. Look at the flower on the right hand side. No petals, no sepals. All you see are the anthers and the filaments. But the filament is colored. Right? So quite beautiful. It's still insect pollinated. Okay, it's colored. Okay, so that was the first brain teaser. The next one, incomplete flowers are imperfect. True or false? Spend some time discussing. Complete flowers are imperfect. True or false? Incomplete flowers have to be imperfect. Is it true? False? Will it be true and false? Okay? Alright, let's go up. Who says this statement is true? Raise your hand. Alright, got some true. Okay, Rihanna, Aiman, Isam. Why do you think this can be true?
Because incomplete flower means like imperfect means is only one, right? It's a male.
Okay, imperfect means you either have male or female. Okay?
Yeah. So that means like it's true.
Isam brought something interesting. Now if I swap the words around,
Oh, yeah.
imperfect flowers are incomplete. True? Incomplete flowers are imperfect. not necessarily true. Right? You can be incomplete, but you can still be perfect, right? As we mentioned earlier. Missing the petals, the sepals, but you are still perfect. Okay? So you see these terms are linked to each other, but somewhat different. Two more terms I'd like to introduce to you. Number one, monocotyledon, dicotyledon. A monocot is a plant where the seed, right? Okay, monocot versus dicot. A monocot, I don't know if you noticed before, when a plant first sprouts, you will sometimes see one baby leaf sprout out. Some seeds sprout out. The first, right, when it first comes out, it's two baby leaves. The leaves, we call them cotyledons. So, a monocot is the one where at the baby stage, you only have one cotyledon. Cotyledon. Dicot has two cotyledons. Sorry? I will. Is this the correct spelling? Coty. Oh, yes. Ayo, poor thing. Who's still coughing so? Okay, not? Okay. I heard, right, if you do handstand, right, you help. Drinking water while doing handstand. Ayo. You're so close to my camera also. We will be wearing it from a certain time slot. Okay, also monocot, dicot. You cannot, how do you tell at an adult stage whether this plant is a monocot, dicot? You can tell if the flowers, for example, comes in multiple of three, the parts. Yeah, the petals. Or the parts, anthers and so on and so forth. If the petals and flower parts come in multiples of 5, it's a dicot. So the flower you just handled, butterfly pea, is it a dicot or monocot? Think back. How many petals were there? How many anthers do you encounter?
Mono.
How many petals? Point one is 2. So there was one big one, 2 wing, 2 cute. So 5 petals. How many anthers were there? Stamens were there? There were 10 in total, multiples of 5. This is actually a dicot. If I were to plant one of the seeds and when it first sprout out, you will see 2 cotyledons. Okay? Yeah, that's one petal. One big petal. Last terminology I'd like to introduce to you, monoecious, dioecious. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, then up comes the brain teaser. Monoecious plants have both male and female flowers located on the same plant. I'd like you to draw this diagram down. It may help you out in the future. Okay, this is one plant, this is one plant, this is one plant. I'm going to show you 2 kinds of monoecious plants. I'd like you to copy this down. A monoecious plant, alright, can have both male and female flowers located on the same plant. So, a monoecious plant could be this: a flower containing both male and female parts. Male and female parts, monoecious. Or, it could be like that: a flower that is male, and then a flower that is female on the same plant. As long as there are the male and female on the same plant, it's monoecious. Okay? Let's look at dioecious. Dioecious is this. The male and female flowers are always on separate plants. So you will find this flower only contains male flower. This flower only contains male. This one contains female. Okay, so the idea of dioecious means the male female always on separate plants. Monoecious on the same plant. If you think you understand what this means, you try this brain teaser. Monoecious plants always have to have perfect flowers. Okay, monoecious plants always have perfect flowers. I see how shaking your head. Okay, now I twist it around. Perfect flowers are always monoecious. Perfect flower, plants with perfect flowers are always monoecious. Right? I really like to think about this. Plants that have perfect flowers are always monoecious. True, huh? Plants that are monoecious always have perfect flowers. Not necessarily. I could have imperfect flowers. Okay? Okay, so these are it's another skill to pick up these terminologies. I actually have not tested this before because it's a bit lame. Unless I do this kind of brain teaser, then very fun. Okay, pollination. Earlier we were talking about insect and wind pollination. Here's a pollinator. So I personally like to collect pollinators of the insect type. Here's a bee. All the pollen grains. I want to show you a video. It's super cool. Watch what happens when a bumblebee goes up to a flower. Right? Bumblebees, you hear the zzzz, right? That's because there's a lot of vibration. Look what happens when he uses that vibration on the flower. Okay, see here? Look here, look here. Can you see the pollen grains? Look at the pollen grains just falling into the area where it's collecting it. This is a flower. Then someone put a vibrating tool and put it on the flower. Then you can see all the pollen grains coming out. Alright, a lot, right? Do you notice the pollen grains just fall out? Gravity works quite hard on this. So all the more you don't want to expose it to the wind, it doesn't get carried away, it just falls down with the help of gravity. So all the more you need insects to help with this. Okay, if I were to zoom into pollen grains, you'll find they're quite special. Those that are insect pollinated tend to be spiked, so they can cling on to the insects. Those that are not tend to be smaller and very light, not spiked. The last part of the lesson is talking about self and cross-pollination. Okay, self and cross-pollination. I think you've done this before in primary school, what self and cross-pollination is. Self-pollination is something like this. I can same flower and self-pollinate oneself. That's self-pollination. Self-pollination can also be this. One flower to another flower of the same plant. What's cross-pollination? Is if I go from one flower to another flower of another plant. Okay? So self and cross. What are the advantages of self-pollination? Much like asexual reproduction. If you self-pollinate, you preserve the good genes that you have. But that results in very little genetic variation, which is not so good. But when you cross-pollinate, there's an outward shuffle. Right? There's genetic variation, you're more adaptable to the environment. So actually it's the same points. I would like to end off the lesson with this. How do plants promote cross-pollination? So that you ensure that you are varied. How do we ensure that this often happens, cross-pollination? Number one, the first thing is, if your plant is dioecious, cross-pollination always occurs. Right? That's one feature of plants that want to ensure cross-pollination. If you are dioecious, male and female on different plants, no choice. Cross-pollination has to occur.
I'm very sorry.
It's okay. I've had this moment before. Okay, dioecious. Okay, can you find this part of your textbook? Sometimes we may ask you, how do plants promote cross-pollination? Right, so these features are critical for you. I think it's just neatly all on one page. So one is morphological. Morphological means the adaptation, the physical adaptation of the plant. Next is a temporal kind of adaptation. Temporal means time. You can bracket and say time. What do I mean by time? For plants that have both male and female plants on the same flower, cross-pollination will be a bit hard if you think about it, right? If I simply brush my own anther with my own stigma, self-ready. So how do I prevent that? Well, a lot of bisexual plants have come up with it. What they do is that either they allow the anthers to ripen first, and then the female part ripen later, or they let the female part ripen first, and then the male part ripen later. There are terms for that. Total entry means the male part developed first, the female later. Protogyny, the female part develops first, the male part later on. If we stagger the development, then there's less chance we will self-pollinate. I'd like to show you a flower that's able to do just that by staggering its development of the female and the male parts. This flower is called the corpse flower because it smells like a rotting corpse.
And lasts about 24 hours. The bloom of the rare and gigantic Titan arum, better known as the corpse flower. It's a mimic. It copies the stench of dead, rotting animals. But hold up, what you're looking at isn't actually the flower. That part? It's a modified leaf called the spathe. It even looks like raw meat. And this is the spadix. It heats up like a mammal's body. So warm it steams. It's all meant to attract its pollinators, insects that lay their eggs on fresh carcasses. But the flowers, they're way down in here. Each of these is a male flower. And below are the female ones. With just hours to reproduce, the stakes are high for Titan arum. It would be easy if it could reproduce using its own pollen. But the plant needs fresh genetic material, pollen from other corpse flowers, to make these, the fruit and seeds that eventually will become healthy new plants. So, it staggers things. The female flowers are ready first. They get sticky. The plant sends out its powerful stench, more than 30 chemicals in all. Some are nice. The spathe releases a jasmine smell. But mostly, it smells like funky cheese, rotten garlic, or dead rat in the wall. That aroma tricks flies to come investigate, thinking it might be a good spot for their young. And they might bring along pollen from another corpse flower, brushing it on the female flowers. A few hours later, the male flowers release strings of pollen. Some of it falls on the female flowers, but by then they're no longer able to use it, which is how the plant avoids pollinating itself. Titan arum is rare. Poachers and deforestation in Sumatra, where it's from, have taken a toll. And in botanical gardens, like here at the University of California in Berkeley, there aren't any other Titan arums in bloom to share pollen with. So when one opens up, biologists often collect pollen by hand to freeze and use later when another corpse flower is ready. Which is how this lonely giant survives, with such a foul and fleeting bloom. Hi, Hi, it's Lauren. We found this little guy cruising on a corpse flower in Berkeley. So let's sometimes pollinate.
This flower can go up to 3 meters in height. You think about that, huh? Yeah, 3 meters. That's me plus log of. Okay, so one last trick up its leaves or flowers to prevent cross-pollination, to promote cross-pollination is, let's say a pollen grain of the same flower, same plant lands on itself. Very exciting. Things that, I found a cheap way. Well, there are chemicals inside the stigma that will carry out a process called self-incompatibility to prevent the pollen grain from growing itself deep into the ovule area. Right? So there are chemicals to prevent the pollen grains from having any effect. That's called self-incompatibility. Okay? I'd like to conclude today's lesson with a summary. So what have we covered today? Number 1, you need to know the flower parts. Number 2, you need to differentiate between insect and wind pollinated flowers. Number 3, you need to differentiate all the terminologies. Okay, monoecious, dioecious, all stuff. Did I spell it wrongly? Terminologies. Okay. Last but not least, how to promote cross-pollination. Okay, 4 things from today. The first 2 is kind of an extension from primary school. I would say these 2 things are the new secondary school portions. Okay? Yes, Ivan?
If all plants want to promote cross-pollination, what plants are being competed about? They are like powerful as well.
Okay, if a lot of plants want to have cross-pollination, what's the point of having perfect flowers, having more male and female plants, right? I guess it gives you a choice. If the environment just doesn't allow you to, there's not enough flowers to go around, cannot cross-pollinate, I have an option to do self-pollination. Yeah? So sometimes it's about choice. So that you can adapt to the environment based on conditions.
Self-incompatibility is just an adaptation. It doesn't always happen.
Correct, it's an adaptation. It could happen if we require it. Yeah. Okay? Alright, so 4 things from today. Be good to go ahead and do a quick revision. Alright? If you want more flowers, there are flowers in the front for you to collect and do what you wish to do with it. You can do a second round of dissection or you can extract the pigment. Okay, in this box over here. Whatever left over, just leave it in the classroom, okay? Alright, that's all for today. Thank you, class.